with that. If you're going to speak, please press the button and the little red light will go on. The lady who's hidden behind me over here will remind me and remind you if you don't do it. We are filming today. The members of the public will not be filmed, I am assured, but the members of the board will. We're not transmitting live, but it will be available on our website. This is our sort of dry run, if we can say such a thing. So welcome to the governing body meeting in public. Currently we are in a thing called PERDA because of the local elections, and as such there are no agenda items for decision at this meeting. As we've always done, questions from the public we will take at the end of the meeting, as this is a meeting in public and not a public meeting. And I've done the bit about being videoed. I've got my IT here to remind me about what I'm supposed to be saying. And the CCG has a protocol setting out how it will conduct its meeting, and this is available on our website. For those of us who are on call and things, if you have mobile phones or other IT devices, if you can put them to quiet, that would be helpful. And I accept that some people may get urgent messages as we go on, and so you're very welcome to look, but if we can keep it quiet, that would be helpful to everybody. Right, I hope I've remembered everything. Declarations of interest in matters covered on the agenda. The GP members are all members of the Richmond General Practice Alliance. Obviously I am, well maybe not obviously, but I am a GP, so I will be handling item 2.1 about the primary care strategy to Bob, who is my vice chair, to chair that part of the agenda. So that's just to forewarn him. I'm moving us on then to 1.3, minutes of the CCG governing body meeting of the 6th of March. So if we go through those for matters of accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, 6, 7 and 8. All accurate. Congratulations to Joe. Well done. Thank you. So if we go to our action log. So I have 3 actions here, and they are, no, I have 4 actions here, and they are all on track. Okay, so unless anybody has any comments, I'm going to move us on to the substantive parts of the agenda. The items taken in private on the 6th of March are listed in the agenda, which is available to the public. So I'm going to take us to the Managing Director's report.
Thank you, Graham. A short report from me this time. Some affirmation or reaffirming some of the roles of the governing body. So we have Bob and Susan, I'm pleased to say, have extended their lay member of terms of office. I believe that's for another 3 years, am I right? 1 year, 1 year, sorry. 1 year. So they're going to extend their lay member term office for another year. I want to thank Bob and Susan for agreeing to extend their term office, and all their really value all their support and hard work in the role. And as Graham said at the beginning, Bob has agreed to be the vice chair of the governing body. And I'd like to welcome Paul Gallagher as our new lay member for audit chair and conflicts of interest, as in replacement of Charles, who retired at the end of January. Paul also holds that role with Kingston CCG, so I welcome Paul onto the governing body. The only other item I have to report today is around the Healthy London Partnership plans and funding for 18-19. This was considered and agreed by the CCG's Finance Committee in March. People will remember the Healthy London Partnership was established in 2015, with the aim of supporting delivery of the ambitions set out in the Better Health for London and NHS 5-year forward view plans. As with all our commissioning functions, we continuously review the best level of delivery, and the accountable officers across London looked at where, and as our partnerships have grown, we've been able to do more locally, so where we can continue activity at London level. And the result of that review has meant that we have reduced the funding that goes into Healthy London Partnership, and that has decreased for Richmond by about 158,000 in 18-19. So whilst the Healthy London Partnership continues, it has narrowed its scope in recognition of the developing partnerships at a local level. That's all I had to report this month. I'm happy to take any questions.
So can I just come back on the HLP? Sorry, it does say Kingston here. I'm sure that meant to be Richmond. Just want to check that that is the right amount for Richmond. Okay. Oh, so I've got an old version. What I was going to say is we're still trying to hold the same level of funding for this year for HLP due to the fact that the reductions may well have consequences in stranded costs or costs of redundancies or something like that. So we're going to keep it the same level of funding held, and then if there is a budget release, it will be later on in the year. But we are expecting going into 1920 to have that release. So I just thought I'd mention that.
And just to give you confirmation that in the budget setting we've held it at that value, at the outturn value.
Any other questions or queries for Tonya? Right, I'm going to move us on to my report, which is verbal and is very brief because I was away for 4 weeks, which is the longest time I've been away for work in 35 years, which is a major shock, and it's an even bigger shock coming back. Aftershock. 2 very brief updates. So I understand Cedars Ward is open now in Teddington. The move that Tony had signposted at the last governing body has now happened. As this is a public meeting, I just want to say thank you and farewell to Zara, who is, sadly for us, leaving us, but positively for her, going into partnership in a local practice. So good for the public of Richmond. As she was she was trained at my practice, I would say that, so I have to declare a conflict of interest. I don't think I have anything else to report. Any questions or queries? Okay, moving us on to the Audit Committee Chair's report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just for the record, the main Audit Committee was held on the 27th of March, and it was at that point still chaired by Bob, but I'm giving the update from that. I think the key issue that came out of that meeting on the 27th of March was the board assurance framework. And I think it's something that just over time probably has lost a little bit of visibility, and I think we felt with good practice that going forward now we're going to bring the BAF back to Audit Committee, review that and certainly make it more visible to the governing body as well, and it's the same initiative in Kingston as well. So I think on a fairly regular basis we'll review that in Audit Committee going forward. I think the other key issue was we reviewed the initial set of accounts, and then we had an extraordinary meeting on the 24th of April where we reviewed the draft accounts that were submitted by Grant Thornton and then submitted to NHS England. At that meeting, a couple of minor changes, but nothing significant or material, and that was then sent on to NHS England. Final accounts will be reviewed and signed off on the 29th of May. And again, just in terms of governance, those accounts and the annual report was sent to the membership group, and that was approved on the 25th of April. So I think that is basically the key issues. We have a draft head of internal audit opinion, which gave, I guess overall, an adequate and effective framework for risk management, but it did note that there were further enhancements required in some aspects of governance and internal control. So it's an amber green rather than a green statement of opinion. Something to continue to be discussed, but that is the likely outcome for the annual accounts. I think that is it.
Thank you. Any questions or queries? Thank you. Sorry, we're now on item 1.9, South West London Health and Care Partnership update.
Yeah. Did you want to? Do you
Shall I start and then you can, I'm sure others and Sarah will have comments to make, yes. The report you have in front of you is the first new standard report that we want to bring to governing bodies. So any comments, feedback, suggestions for improvement would be welcome. I don't going to go through it in detail. I'm just going to cover the first two slides because I'm going to assume the members have read the detail of the work streams. So this report sets out progress on the South West London-wide programmes of work, which together form our South West London Health and Care Partnership strategy, or part of it. So the report covers the South West London work. I will give you a brief update on the Local Transformation Board at the end. So the report has details on deliverables on the National 5-Year Forward View programmes, deliverables on the work on clinical pathways, and the status of the enabling work streams. So if we just go on to the key messages slide, I say lots of activity has been happening over the months, and I think that's why it's really important that we bring a regular update to governing bodies so that people are aware of the work that's going on. So you recall that in November we published the South West London Health and Care Partnership 1 year on document. The discussion period's now closed. It closed at the end of February, and we're now responding to feedback, and we have responded to feedback. And some of that feedback will be addressed in our local health and care plans that are being developed. And that brings me on to, I think, to the key activity that's happening in the Richmond space is the development of the local health and care plans. And we had a really good prioritisation workshop under the Health and Wellbeing banner a couple of weeks ago, so that the health and care plans are progressing. We hope to have something that we can start sharing in around June time, but I'm looking at Julia because she's leading on this. So I know people are very nervous, they haven't got a tangible product, but I think we will have something that we can start sharing around June time. But we'll keep people updated because we do want to socialise the health and care plan as widely as possible over the coming months, so that we get a real ownership and understanding what is in the plan, with an aim to publish them in November. We are making clinical and quality improvements, so we've had a Pan-London workshop South West London workshop on reviewing ear, nose and throat pathway, and we've also have a work stream on children and young people's mental well-being as a priority for our health promotion work, and we've reframed our workforce priorities, and that's being developed in conjunction with workforce directors and local authorities. We continue to strengthen our leadership, so we're reviewing the purpose and approach of the programme board, and we have been in discussion with a range of providers on organisational development, and we are delivering all our 5-year forward view programme milestones in primary care, urgent emergency care, mental health transformation programmes. So that's really good, and we remain in line with our delivery plan expectations. And we have put in a bid for perinatal transformation funding with stakeholders. I think we now have the decision, but it's still embargoed at the moment, so hopefully we'll be able to announce positive outcome in the next week or so. So those are the only comments I was going to make on the South West London parts of the programme. I would suggest we pause there and take questions. Sarah might, and I can talk about the Local Transformation Board afterwards.
So I think just to positively pick up some of the actions as well that you will have seen. So when we talked about primary care transformation funding, and we had the committee in common and decided how to distribute that across South West London, that is part of the overarching primary care work stream that we're looking at scale primary care and how we support that in a different way. I think it is the perinatal bid, I think, is very important. We've also been part of a London-wide bid going in on digital. I think we've bid for about 5.3 million across London for the implementation of digital pathways, of which there are many. I'm sure you're involved in many of them. And I think the MSK work, which you will have been involved in locally, and you've got a whole local work stream around how you implement single points of access and so on, that is to a South West London-wide model that we've all agreed to. So we are doing a huge amount across South West London, hopefully to support the local in delivery. We've had a discussion in the past about estates. I think we recognise the need to have a strategic approach from the local, but also we need to have a workshop and a way of working across South West London on estates so that we can bid for funding and so that we can actually have a strategic approach to how we use capital. So that work is also ongoing. So there's a huge amount of work going on. This is only a short report. What we're trying to do is to bring together a regular report. We are in PERDA, so you know some of it is a little bit bland in that respect, but we would welcome your feedback on how the report is written, how helpful it is. And beneath all of these areas, there is a huge delivery plan. And what we could do is regularly share with you the delivery plans as well as the kind of overarching presentation. It's a lot of information, but maybe every 6 months or so you might want to see the detail of the delivery plan so you can see what they say. And many of those sort of drill down to local level as well as South West London level. So please do, it doesn't have to be now, but please do feedback outside of the meeting if there's anything you think should be changed about this.
So any comments? Huda.
Just as you know, someone who can say a bit remote from this, it's a very impressive set of activities, but I can't tell whether this is good, bad or indifferent in terms of what our ambition has been around the plan. So I don't know if you have a feel or any kind of overall summary about where we are in relation to what we set up to do.
So I would say it was differential depending on programmes. So, you know, there's been a huge amount of work, as we know, around primary care access, which has been hugely successful across London, but across South West London. I think we had full GP access by about May last year. It was about a year now we've had full GP access, extended access. So as that is one of our kind of main programmes, that's been hugely successful. Work around primary care at scale, huge amount more work to be done on that. So I think it's differential depending on the programme. I think there's still a huge amount to be done. I would say that there's a number of programmes where we've refreshed the approach, so things like workforce and digital. Those, I think, will come to the fore, and estates. So we've done a huge amount of work recently just to try and get those up to speed. And I think those will come forward as successful work streams, but I don't think we're quite there yet. So particularly around the enablers, I think more work to be done. But what we could do, as I said, is share with you the detailed plans. I think cancer is very successful. We have some of the best outcomes in South West London in the country around cancer, and we meet most of the targets as well. So there's some of our work programmes are delivering very, very well, but some of them less so. So, you know, it depends on where we are in that process. Exactly. Yeah. So what we could do is we'll get you the more detail, and I think what would maybe helpful, and I'll ask the question, is if we took one of the areas and maybe did a deep dive every time we do a report. So we have the overarching report, but maybe we bring a deep dive into cancer at one meeting and a deep dive into mental health another meeting to give a bit more feel for, and get some people to come along and talk about the work that they're doing. Would that be helpful? Yeah.
So on the estates bit, what we find in local authority, understandably, decisions in the NHS are very slow, given, you know, the hopes that the NHS the local NHS will need to jump through. Is there anything we can do to try and use this work stream to kind of make this a bit of a slicker process and work with you on that?
So absolutely. I think that's exactly what this work stream will do. So we're having a clearer strategy and prioritisation process both locally and at South West London level. What that will mean is that will streamline processes for us obtaining capital and also planning forwards. So, and I don't think we've really had that level of strategic planning at this level in the past. So I think it will streamline it. It doesn't negate the need to go through all of the hoops that we have to go through, but hopefully by the time we get to the point where we're making national arguments or London-wide arguments around funding, we will have already been through that process, and it will be a kind of a pipeline of schemes that will then just come forward, and it will be much quicker than it currently is, which feels a bit pulling everything together at the last minute. Yeah, thank you.
So I was just adding on to the two previous points related to that. So looking at learning disabilities, which Tonya is our Senior Responsible Officer for South West London, hidden in the narrative is the achievement that there are more than 20 people who are now back and living in local communities around South West London as a result of this work. This group of patients were what were identified as a result of the Winterbourne review of people who were living in facilities which were very restrictive and in many cases were remote from where their home originally was. And then just to pick up Sarah's request that we look at one of those areas, this programme is due to finish towards the end of this financial year. And I think it'd be really nice for us to bring a report to the committee about the work that our local teams have been leading on behalf of South West London, but what it has also meant for the Richmond area.
Any other comments? I'm going to be terribly prosaic then. I like the iconography, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
I think it's disappointing that mental health and learning disabilities had the same picture. And I'm not sure that either. I think some of these are more intuitive than others, and perhaps we could get a public group. But I do like the and branding is very powerful for things.
So we've actually done a piece of work on the branding for South West London, because what we've reflected on and have had feedback on is that actually this is a health and care partnership, and it's kind of dominated by the NHS lozenge and the NHS. So we've done a very sort of, can I say, inexpensive piece of work to look at branding, and some of that is around the iconography as well. So what we will come to you with is, and we've had a group that's been looking at that, including some Health Watch and others, and I think Susan was involved in that as well, I think. Were you seeing? No. Okay. So there are a number of people that have been involved, and what we will do is we will come back to you with the outcome of that, but hopefully that will improve.
Right, I'm going to move us on then, and I'm going to hand the chair to Bob for this item.
Okay, thank you, Graham. So for item 2.1, primary care strategy. Catherine McDermott is going to lead us through this.
Thank you very much. You have in front of you a final draft of the primary care strategy. The reason why it's still draft is there are a couple of elements, including the delegated primary care budget, that are to be confirmed. But as also mentioned earlier, as we were in Purdah, we won't be making any decisions today. However, what I'd like to do is take you through all the engagement work that we have completed as part of developing this strategy. And then I'd like to take you to section 11, which in a bit more detail describes what it is that we are intending to take forward as part of the strategy. I'm going to do that to make sure that as a final draft, you're comfortable that it reflects the commissioning intentions and the priorities for Richmond CCG. We've completed quite an extensive engagement piece. You'll remember that the commitment we made when we started this programme was that we would do it co-productively. We've included workshops with RGPA, we've had clinical network meetings, we've used the membership forums, we've used the patient participation group, and we've also been lucky enough to be running an engagement in public engagement piece around quality in primary care. So there's actually an enormous amount of engagement that we've been able to draw on. What I've done in the covering sheet is just give you an idea of the themes that have come back, and this is very much in the spirit of, you said, this is what we've done with that feedback. And I've proposed that the exec summary would be framed in that way. You've said, and this is what we have done in terms of the strategy. Not intending to go through every single bullet point, but it's important to note that the feedback has resulted in change to the priorities that we've listed in the strategy and a change to the objectives that we've listed in the strategy. And on the basis of those changes, the commissioning intentions and what we actually want to do have clearly changed in the strategy as well. The commissioning intentions, which are set out in section 11, which starts on, I probably can't give you the page number actually, section 11, are aligned to the next steps in the strategic commissioning framework and aligned to the South West London Primary Care Plan. So that's
clearly puts us in a very strong place. They build on the existing commissioning intentions that set out in the existing primary care strategy, so it's very much developing and expanding the work that we already had. We've taken it as an opportunity to strengthen the links between the primary care strategy and outcomes-based commissioning. And Julia and I just yesterday agreed that a very helpful next step would be to have a workshop with our CHIP to look at how we strengthen the links between the two. The section I really wanted to focus on is section 11 around delivery. We've already talked about primary care at scale, and we have a very exciting opportunity to look at what does that mean for Richmond. There was a very strong message that came back through the engagement piece around what do we need to do in Richmond to help primary care be sustainable. And that's very much around encouraging practices to work together in networks. So that's very opportune, very timely. That's a piece of work that we need to take forward in partnership with our membership and our GPA around what it is that we need to put in place to make our services sustainable going forward. A big part of that is linking our general practices into the OBC, outcomes-based commissioning, multidisciplinary teams and locality working. We're trying to translate that into our localities as primary care networks. So that's very much something that we need to take forward. And we had a very helpful conversation, Kate and I, at the membership forum last week around what that might actually look like going forward. Moving on, she says, trying to scroll down. Primary care at scale, which is extended access. I think everybody's well briefed on how we have taken that forward and our plans for the Urgent Treatment Centre and Primary Care Centre in Richmond. In terms of the outcomes from the quality engagement events, we have a facilitated workshop plans to take that forward. The themes are very much around what people can reasonably expect in a general practice and what we can reasonably expect that patient behaviour, and we want to start that ongoing conversation about where you best go for which services and how we help people care for themselves, very much that self-care piece of work. And then the final bit that I really wanted to highlight in section 11 is the work that we need to do around IT and GPIT and informatics. It's been another key theme that's come out of the consultation, particularly with the membership, that we need to have a much more coherent approach to the development of IT support within practices and how we actually facilitate the development within practices. And I don't know if anybody else wanted to add to that. The final section, which we wanted to take forward with our members, and Kate did flag this at the membership forum last week, we have a section at the back, number 14, which is the annual implementation plan. If you remember, we said that the strategy would be quite helpful at high level and describe what we want to achieve. And then each year we'd have a much more detailed implementation plan that would set out very clearly what it is we want to achieve and how we want to do that and what the timescales are. So at last week's membership forum, Kate asked for volunteers to join task and finish groups. Each of these implementation plans will be taken forward by interested parties, and they will do a very rapid piece of work on, for example, GPIT, what exactly it is that we want to achieve, what we need to do, and when we need to do it by. And I can see that we've already had one volunteer, which is great to see. The detail of the implementation plans aren't there yet, and again, we want to produce that co-productively. I'd like to stop there and make sure that, particularly section 11, you feel accurately reflects the priority areas that we have and accurately reflects the feedback that we've received from our membership and our local population.
Thank you, Catherine. Questions, comments for Catherine? Yes, Susan.
First of all, I'd like to thank the primary care team and the engagement team on the work that has been done in producing and developing the strategy. It's been really quite an example of how to do engagement and participation in a very inclusive and useful way, leading to this document. So I think that's excellent. I was just wondering, I know this is a draft, so I won't go into too much detail, but whether at some point we should actually have a time frame for the overall thinking actually in the document, so we're clear on the timing, on the time frame for it. And just possibly, we've got lots of objectives in there that in the you said we did. It might be good in framing the priorities if we just had a kind of smaller number of objectives or at least statements of intent into the changes, high level changes we wanted to bring about. And the only, on part 11, the only comment I have was, as I said, we've done an awful lot of engagement and discussion on this, that we are going to develop a plan, a communications engagement plan, but I think even at this stage we could maybe say slightly more about how we see the public engagement going forward. It's just a little bit thin, and I think we know a bit more than that. But otherwise, I'd like to thank everybody, and it's made great progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Any further comments? Yes, Huda.
Again, thank you. A very clear document. On the subject of information, and as we develop the annual plan, it will be really good if we can work around within the governance, information governance systems, is what information we're going to use to assess needs and target the work within practices, especially linking it with what was said earlier around the South West London digital work and sharing of information. So I think the devil is in the detail, and we know how complex this is, but it's very important that we focus, as of the principles of the strategy, on the needs of the patients and on the outcomes for patients. So again, it's an area we really want to work with you on and to help each other in accessing the right information within the right governance structure.
Thank you. Kate.
Huda, thank you for that, because actually for me that we can often lose sight of, you know, being that there's a lot of work to do and things, we can often lose sight of that. So I think it would be really helpful if we could work more closely with public health. I'd really support that, and you know, important that we use data and evidence to drive, you know, improvements, because I think IC clinical colleagues will, they can recognise why they're doing something, and that's a good thing to do. And I think, yeah, maybe we could have a conversation outside to talk about how public health can support that. And I just wanted to reiterate that a big thank you to Catherine and her team, who've put a lot of work into this. I was slightly cynical about whether it could all be done in the time frame, and you know, I've been proved wrong, and that's really good that we got on and did the work. So thank you.
Any further comments? Yes, Graham.
Just 3 small comments. Item 3, general practice. In your first paragraph, the RGPA is not a partnership of local practices; it's a federation. And I would maybe in your bit about definition of primary care, whether we should include 111. It's a bit absent from the document, and I think that's a kind of strategic area we want to be promoting is the word I'm looking for. And thirdly, you've included a lot of data from the JSNA. We have got some activity data which I can forward you, which I apologise for because I probably should have done by now, to give some idea of scale of activity. So we know roughly 85,000 people will be seen in primary care each month, well, in general practice, sorry, not in primary care, within Richmond, about double that number in pharmacies, and about 4,000 in hospitals. So it just gives a different perspective, but I will forward that to you.
Yes, Julia.
Thank you. I think this report, or the strategy, really shows how we are joining up the whole system, the contribution primary care has in supporting the work that we're doing, particularly around complex care management and the work around localities. The other thing, just to add, we have, with this working with public health, produced some locality profiles for the 4 localities, and of course some of the work we're doing around the case for improvement linked to the local health and care plan is actually drawing on some of the strategy and the JSNA data we've got. So I suppose the plea here is to make sure that our Richmond story is consistent with the stories that we're using in the local health and care plan, possibly actually the refreshes you're currently doing as well, Huda, because of the changes that might be happening post this Thursday's elections for with the councillors in terms of their briefings, etc. So we just need to make sure we've got the same story, but there is lots of data out there. But I think it's the synergy and the linkages which are really great to see in all of this.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with any further comments? So, I mean, my only comment... Oh, sorry.
Just on the GP IT strategy, obviously there's a few... it's happened on South West London level, and that's more national, isn't it, in terms of the software's coming in and in terms of interoperability. We are working on the OBC programme to bring in interoperability as well. I don't know how that would fit in with the bigger picture going forward.
You're absolutely right, and as Sarah mentioned earlier, we have an opportunity in South West London as part of a London bid. I think it's called LICRA. I don't know what LICRA actually stands for, but yeah. So it's and that it was presented at the last South West London Digital and Technology Transformation Board, of which I'm a member. It's actually a very exciting opportunity for Richmond, and if we are to secure it, although Plan B would be the South West London interoperability piece, it will massively fast-track the work that we want to do across integrating systems across health and social care. So that's a London-wide piece. However, we'd had already worked up a South West London interoperability project. So either way, this is going to happen, and either way, it's a significant opportunity for Richmond. I think the thinking around introducing the Cerner solution is around making the information systems just one seamless system across the piece. The trick is going to be making sure that general practice systems, which can be quite different, are also integrated in that, so we don't lose the mix in that, so that as a GP, when you do sit there, you do see the full record, and a hospital consultant, when they sit there, can also see the full record. So it's just about making sure that the general practice systems, which are a little bit more bespoke, are also included in that. But I think it represents a significant opportunity, and it's one that I think we would welcome hugely with open arms. But knowing the GP systems, there is a separate local piece of work about making sure that we have the support in place for practices, because I think it varies significantly across practices how people tap into and use the technologies that are available.
Any further comments or questions? I only have one, Catherine, and I think it just relates to the end, one of the end of your sections on the covering note. This is obviously still in draft form. Well, when do you expect this to be actually finalised so that we can see this come back here? I note that we're going to present the implementation plans at the June Primary Care Commissioning meeting, but I'm just anxious that these things can go on and on and on, and it would be good to bring it to a conclusion.
So I look to Yarlini, and I'm assuming that the confirmation of the primary care budgets will be relatively soon, so therefore we could say the next meeting. Looking.
I hope so. We're waiting for the bottom-up costings from the Central Primary Care team in South West London. So they should be imminent. We're trying to, we can give an indicative amount, obviously, but it'd be better to get that full detail.
I think you're right. Let's have the final numbers, and so let's not overpromise when we can bring it back. But when we do bring it back, let's see if we can bring this to final conclusion. Great. But great work. Thank you. I'm going to hand back.
Thank you, as always, for your excellent chairing and timekeeping. So moving us on to then item 2.2, the National Staff Survey result for Richmond CCG, and over to Vicky, I assume.
Thank you, Chair. Richmond CCG took part in the annual National Staff Survey, which is run by the Pickett Institute. This is something we've done for the last few years. And our results are compared against those results from other CCGs, not hospital or community trusts. The response rate for Richmond CCG was 76%, which was slightly lower than the national average of 80%. The Ways of Working group, which is our staff engagement group across Kingston and Richmond, have looked at both set of survey results, discussed them at length and come up with an action plan for areas for improvement, which I'll come onto in a minute. The surveys and actions are part of a wider staff engagement and communications programme that we're running across the two CCGs. And a lot of those initiatives are becoming much more easy to deploy now that we are all co-located in the same building in Teddington. So things like the internal communications is much easier, and we're already seeing the benefits of that just being in there for the last 6 weeks. We're also wanting to streamline all our HR processes so that everybody in the two CCGs, wherever you work, has the same positive experience. But we're also looking at rolling out a common programme across the 5 CCGs across the Alliance, and there's work to develop strategic HR objectives, which hopefully will benefit staff in Richmond. We had good results in a variety of areas. A lot less of our staff reported that they felt under pressure to come to work when unwell, which can be a problem, particularly in the NHS. Our staff reported that they were satisfied with their flexible working arrangements. We had a very low score for staff experiencing physical violence from patients. One would hope that would be the case. We're not a frontline business, but sometimes there can be incidents in commissioning organisations, but thankfully not in Richmond. And people also reported high levels of satisfaction in the quality of work that they're able to deliver and support from their immediate managers. There are areas that we want to focus on in the coming year, and right at the end of the summary of results that you have from PICA is a very high-level action plan which we've been working on with the Ways of Working group. A particular area of concern was the percentage of staff experiencing harassment, bullying or abuse from staff in the last 12 months, which we have all agreed is at an unacceptable level. We have done a lot of work to address the issues. And the Managing Director attended the Ways of Working group and had a very candid conversation with the team about how to address this. We're going to introduce mandatory training for line managers. We're going to promote access to an anti-bullying guardian and also promote access to the HR business partner. We get our HR support from the commissioning support unit, so they're not always on site, but we want to make sure that people know how they can go and have a conversation with the business partner. And we're also going to conduct our own internal survey in the summer just to check how people are feeling partway through the year. But we do believe that we've addressed some of these areas already, and anecdotal feedback from staff shows that that this is really reducing. We also had some areas to improve around the quality of our non-mandatory training. I think it's fair to say that we don't offer a lot of non-mandatory training because we don't have a huge amount of budget to do that. But we particularly had some feedback from some of our nursing staff around that. And we're going to be looking at offering them further opportunities to support their professional training requirements. We're also, again, looking at training opportunities across the Alliance. So if we join up our resources across the 5 CCGs, we should be able to come up with a much more meaningful programme of development for staff. Another area for improvement is the number of staff reporting good communication between senior management and staff. And I think these results reflect the changes that the CCG has gone through in the year, particularly with a change of the senior management team, lots of new faces, and the senior managers were very challenged in terms of trying to be available to all their staff across 2 locations. And that's one of the things that's become much easier since we've moved. And we're also going to do some work around explaining to staff how to report unsafe clinical practice. Again, this is one of those areas that not a lot of staff go into provider environments where they might see unsafe clinical practice, but it's incumbent on us as an employer to ensure that people understand what we mean by unsafe clinical practice and they know how to raise issues if they come across any examples. So those are the particular areas that we've chosen to focus on for the year. As I said, we've got quite a comprehensive programme of staff engagement initiatives, both across the LDU and also more to come across the Alliance. And we're also introducing, we're streamlining the way we communicate across the Alliance with an extra emphasis on staff feedback. And we're really trying to encourage people to feedback their ideas and concerns so that we can address them rather than it being a sort of passive or reactive way of managing things.
Thank you, Vicky.
So obviously I think we've probably disappointed in some of the results of the survey, and we've absolutely acknowledged that and said that we want to improve, and there's lots of reasons why that may have been, but I think that what I've positively heard is some feedback from staff, particularly when I visited the new premises in Thames House, around how much better it is having two staff groups together. The environment is very positive, and people are enjoying working in the environment, which I think is very positive. I also, and it is interesting, sort of when you work in a small CCG, I think there is sometimes a feeling at governing body level that everyone loves working in the small CCG. Some of the messages that have come out to me since we joined in the Alliance, from the staff particularly, is we're really pleased we're in the Alliance because that gives us more opportunity for career progression, it gives us more opportunity for training and development, and we need to make sure that we can absolutely deliver that for those staff. So we're trying to think about how do we make sure we advertise internal roles across South West London, how do we ensure that we put together our training budgets in order to do something that's meaningful. Now that we have a quality director who's a nurse across South West London, how do we provide professional nursing support to nurses? So there's a huge potential there, but we need to make sure that we can tap into it. And I'm sure, I'm sure that the results next year will be much, much better. I have, high expectations of that. But we need to make the best use of all the different resources we have across South West London to ensure that we support our staff in the best possible way.
Thank you for this, Vicky. As a governing body member and mental health lead, I'm really glad you pointed out the issue around harassment and bullying, which, as you said, is disappointing and not acceptable. But I'm quite reassured by the plans you've put in place, and hopefully we will see a marked improvement even in that interim staff survey, the internal survey. Thank you.
So, Vicky, I too was pleased with your plan. You talked about training, and obviously I think you looked like you were directing that towards managers. But I just wondered if there's any mileage in providing some training for governing body GPs in terms of sort of staff management. And whilst we may not have direct line management responsibilities, I think we do have roles where we're expected to sort of, we might be expected to comment on people's performance, or we might be expected to, manage a project. So personally, I would find that quite helpful, I think, and some of my other colleagues might do. So I hope that there may be some training for us as governing body GPs in that as well.
I see lots of nods around the table.
As Managing Director of Richmond CCG, I think it's one of my key roles to develop the staff with the SMT, and I absolutely echo everything Sarah has said. Obviously it saddens me that, people have experienced not always the best working experience, but I am confident working with the teams and working with the whole team that we can do better at our next, both our interim and our staff survey. I would say that I welcome, people need to say it though, don't they? They need to say that if they're not, if this is happening, and we can only address it if people report it, and this is a safe through the staff survey because it's anonymous, it's people feel much safer being able to raise it there. But I also encourage any member of staff, wherever they are in the organisation, to come to talk to me or whoever they trust to speak through issues. But I am confident with the bringing together of the staff onto the Teddington site and the action plan that we will do better. But also that continues check-in with staff that actually the things that we are planning to do are working for them. So we can write an action plan. If it's not doing what it needs to do, we need to change it. So that continues through the WOW group to make sure that it's making the change and the difference that we need to see.
Am I allowed to raise a couple of corporate points rather than public healthy points as a member of the board? I think it's obviously comments have been made on the harassment bit. On the positive story and on people coming to work when they're ill, is the board having a grip also on sickness rates as well? And how does the CCG compare to other public sector bodies, or at least the NHS? So you probably can't answer this now, but shall I take the 2 points together? The other thing is around how the board is keeping an eye on turnover and attrition, given the circumstances. From the SSA point of view, what we found that staff, as much as they love working in the SSA, this have boosted confidence. It's a marketing for people. While I work in a complex environment, I can handle 2 organisations, and we're seeing people going on promotions to other areas as well. So how is the board keeping an eye on these 2 issues?
So we have an executive management team that meets on a monthly basis, and we look at our HR workforce data. We have quarterly reports, and we monitor sickness, absence and staff turnover. So with sickness absence, we don't have any red flags that we're out of the norm. We've had 1 or 2 people on long-term sick for totally understandable reasons. But we do look at those figures on a quarterly basis. In terms of staff turnover, we have had some high turnover in the commissioning function, probably going back a year. But in general, our turnover rates are not extraordinary. And we do offer exit interviews to everybody who leaves the organisations. I conduct them personally, so I can hear firsthand the reasons why people are leaving. They're completely anonymous, but it helps us to identify any key themes. And again, through that process, I see most people who leave, and there isn't sort of one big reason why they leave. There's lots of different circumstances under which staff leave. But we do make sure that we interview everyone.
Actually do see something at SMT as well across South West London. One of the issues is that we're not in line with the NHS because if you look at nursing, they have very high levels of sickness rates, and therefore we look low in comparison. So you have to compare like with like, and we don't have a national comparison in that way on sickness rates. But what we can do is we can look across South West London, because actually when you've got small groups of staff, it's quite difficult, because if you have 1 or 2 people off on long-term sick for very good reasons, that reflects very badly on your sickness rates. So we have to take that into consideration. So we are looking across South West London. I don't think any of our CCGs are particularly out with the figures that we've seen, but we will need to monitor that regularly and keep an eye on it. So, but it is quite a difficult one with small groups of staff to manage, and also to understand what's the correct comparator to use for that, because in the NHS, I think it's the wrong comparator, because nursing staff have higher levels of sickness, probably because they're on the front line and so on. So, I don't think that's a direct comparator we can use. So I think having South West London will help us to do some of that.
Any other? Branko?
Sorry, just to ask about the interims. At one point previously, there was a number of interims coming into the CCG. Are we now coming to the situation when we've got a stable environment, people staying for longer, with longer-term contracts?
Yes, well, particularly with the introduction of the IR35 regulations a year ago, that we use interims in CCGs significantly less than we used to. So though we would only use interims for very finite pieces of work. So generally we offer people normal agenda for change contracts. But I think definitely we don't have a high number of vacancies. That we are recruiting to some new roles, particularly in the primary care team, but we don't have a significant number of vacancies at the moment.
I was just going to echo that. We don't have any interims cover what I would call core roles. And as Vicky said, any interim work would now be specific projects. We are, one of the benefits of coming together in the LDU and the alliance is that we can use our finite resource more effectively. But I mean, and I generally, the field doesn't feel that people want to leave or want to move on anymore, but they see very much a opportunity working within the alliance to work and grow and develop in South West London.
Any other comments? Fergus.
So just one last one, which links to our staff survey, is the workforce race equality standards is an area which I think the NHS are very keen to make sure that we have appropriate actions to address some of the impacts of discrimination. Looking at our action plan, it doesn't jump out that this is an element of it, although I'm absolutely certain it's contained within all of these actions. But I just wondered if it's worth the Ways of Working group thinking about reflecting our very culturally and gender diverse governing body, but also our workforce, if there are any particular elements of the data which might be identifying that certain subgroups of our staff, not based on their role but on other protected characteristics, it's worth us thinking about. So it's no criticism of what we have, but I just wonder if there's something that we might need to think about for inclusion going forward.
Okay, noted. Any other comments? So I have let this run on. I apologise for going out of time after Bob's excellent chairing of the previous one, but obviously staff is vital to our organisation. We are a staff organisation. It's disappointing that we didn't do as well in this survey as we have done previously. We were going through a turbulent time, as has been noted. We had a lot of interims and we were basically merging two organisations into one, which always raises a high number of insecurities. We've heard all the measures that you've put in place, and I think you've heard the comments from the board. We accept your assurance that things are going to improve, and we look forward to hearing that. Right, I'm going to move us on then to item 2.3, outcome-based commissioning. Julia?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring an update report to the governing body on two significant transformational programmes of work that we've been undertaking and progressing within the Richmond CCG, which are around improving the outcomes for local people and local patients. The outcomes-based commissioning programmes predate me and have been focused around both physical health, which has been work that's been undertaken through our local GP Federation in a joint venture with our community provider, Hounslow and Richmond Community Trust, which is the first part of the paper. And the second part of the paper then leads on to share the update on the work that's going on in the mental health transformation programme, which has many partners working together under a memorandum of understanding. So the first part of the report updates on the physical health outcomes-based commissioning programme, or OBC, which was a 5-year commissioning contract that was let with the providers, as it says in the paper. In the last 2 years, we've been focusing, the providers have been focusing, working also with GPs and other secondary care partners in delivering and redesigning 5 clinical pathways. One's been around diabetes, which has been about establishing a community-focused diabetes service so that those patients who can be and could be managed in the community by their local GPs, but also by clinical nurse specialists, are seen in settings care closer to home rather than necessarily having to go up to the hospitals. And I'm pleased to say that those pathways are now in place and operating from 2 hubs. We've also been working and redesigning and building on some existing respiratory services that we've had locally for people with long-term conditions such as chronic obstructive airways disease. And this is about, again, local people with mild to moderate disease being able to be managed, again, care close to home by community nurse specialists, physiotherapists and their GPs. And again, this work has been, these pathways have been successfully implemented, and we're supporting GPs in identifying the patients and actually ensuring that pre the winter period that the patients have a care plan that will support them in managing their disease, understanding the exacerbation and also knowing how to access treatment as required, but still having the right pathways and the fast-track arrangements for them to go back into hospital or receive hospital advice and care as required. There's also been work that's been done in terms of looking at the cardiology and increasing cardiology within the cardiac rehabilitation service. So people who have had a cardiac event have been and had access to cardiac rehabilitation that helps them regain their function, regain their confidence, being able to undertake the activities that they've done before. What we've done as part of this programme is extend that programme, but also we have extended it to patients with heart failure who can also benefit from the service. We've also been working with community nurses to be able to administer IV diuretics at home and in the community so that patients don't have to go into hospital. So again, this is all about patients receiving care closer to home with the right clinical model and pathways around them, and very much working closely with GPs in supporting this and other practitioners. Then two other joined together pieces of pathway work have been around identifying and working with those members of our population who are considered to be frail as a result of age or their clinical conditions, their comorbidities, and also supporting people to have a very good end-of-life experience. This work has now actually started to migrate into the work that Catherine alluded to briefly earlier around the development and implementation of locality working, which is about supporting and identifying people who are at risk of admission, at risk of deteriorating health and needing some proactive management to enable them to maintain or improve their health status, but also their ability to live a good quality life. This will be supported by risk stratification, so identifying people who are at risk, and then implementing care planning and care management of these patients, both by general practice and by community nurses working out of HRCH. So this summarises the pathway work that's been undertaken to date, and also the work as it's emerging into the new locality model, particularly those who are a frail population, those with complex care needs and those at end-of-life care. And you've got the roadmap that's shown in 1.7 that shows the journey to date. And the plan now is for the locality working to be rolled out in this is current financial year. We have 4 localities. We have clinicians working together in those localities. They will be supported by the risk stratification tool that will provide them with patients and identified patients with whom we need to be working in a more case management proactive way. And as part of all of this, we'll also be looking at how we actually ensure that those with physical and mental health needs are also cared for in this way as part of the locality model. And we are also at the stage where we are developing the metrics which will measure the impact of the locality working, and this is supported by work that's being done by Catherine as part of primary care, which is looking at the roles of GPs and the use of complex needs, local commissioned service specification to support that work as well as the work that we are doing with HRCH, Hounslow and Community, in terms of the reprofiling they've undertaken of their community nurses, their community matrons to work in this way, and their therapists. So that's a very quick gamble through where we are in terms of the physical OBC programme. Shall I stop there before I go on to the mental health and see if there are any questions?
Shall we? I would carry on,
Right,
because
okay,
the
then.
intention is to merge the two programmes anyway,
Right,
and then
lovely,
take it all
thank
at the
you.
end.
And then the second very significant transformational programme is that's looking at people with mental health needs. As you can see from the paper in 2.1, there is a multitude of partners from across statutory and the voluntary sector and the local council coming together to work as an alliance to improve the care, the pathways and the support and management for people with mental health presentations. A review of the programme was undertaken last year, and we've now agreed to a number of priorities that we'll be undertaking and taking forward in the next 6 months, 12 to 6 months. There's work that will be undertaken around looking at access to mental health services, and that's about looking at a common access pathway into services. If you actually map all the different services that are around, there is a number of services, and it can be quite confusing for referrers and particularly for local patients to know where to go to get the level of support and care and access into the right services. And this is not dissimilar to other models where we have single points of access, single pathways, common assessment frameworks, and then actually the right referring of patients into the right type of support, care, clinical management that's needed to enable them to actually have support and be managed and treated through their care journey. There is also work in which we're working particularly closely with Mind around a business case for a crisis cafe, which would provide an alternative to admission for both Kingston and Richmond residents. We're working together on this when they are potentially going into crisis or have just come out of receiving care. And this is about providing, again, care closer to home, providing support to people at what can be a very vulnerable period in their care. There's work going on to train peer navigators, and this is about using local people who have experienced mental health problems themselves to actually support and work with people in their local community who both have mental health and also have substance misuse issues. There's work going on across the South West London Alliance, which is looking at placements. There are a number of people for whom a specialist or a placement is required to actually support them when they are in crisis. And one of the important things is about how we repatriate them back to local services and support them. And actually, we can do that collectively across South West London. And then the other significant and important piece of work is also around how we ensure that we don't actually just look at people's problems or people's presentations through a mental health lens and not consider their physical problems. And equally, when you've got people with physical problems, there may be some psychological and mental health problems as well that they present with. And so we're looking at how we can build and develop the talking therapies, the IAP provision, for people with long-term conditions, but the other part of that is also ensuring that people who have mental health problems are actually also their physical health problems are also taken into account. And then there is a piece of work that we're doing very closely with the local authority, which is around the wellbeing service and the substance misuse service, and actually looking at how we can work and develop a support programme for people who have mild to moderate mental health issues, but also are using cannabis, which is a significant issue locally. So I think, again, that's another quick walk through what we are doing in the mental health space. I'm happy to take your questions, and Tonya and Stavluva might want to add something on around the mental health programme of work.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with Tonya and then go to Stavluva.
Not a question. Just an update, really. I had a really, really productive meeting last Thursday with the leaders of the system in Richmond, and that was with Liz from Liz Bruce, the Director of Adult Social Care, Anne Radmore, Chief Exec of Kingston Hospital, Darren Timmons, Chair of RGPA, David Bradley, the Mental Health Trust, Chief Exec, about how we can commit to work together on this transformation programme. A bit that you said, Graham, about bringing mental health and physical health into the same space, and a real commitment from them as leaders, and Chell West was represented there as well through Dominic Conlon, and really wanting to work on a set of priorities in 1819 that reflected in the letter. in the paper. I think for me, I think we need to let them do that. They need to come together as a group. They need to work together with us as a group. So I'm going to talk to, particularly with Bob, because we've been chairing some work. Actually, I think we need to give them the space to transform rather than hold to account. But we can talk that bit. So, but I think a real commitment to want to make a difference to the services in Richmond and work together to transform services to reflect what the population has been telling for some time about what needs to change. So I was really energised and enthused by that meeting.
So I really support all these alliance priorities for the mental health OBC. What I would have liked to see a little bit more of is more around the wider determinants of mental health, such as employment, housing, benefits, leisure and education, and how they fit in. And I'm glad you just said there is some commitment from the local authority to sort of maybe work close on this OBC programme.
So they are really, really important. And when we write our local health and care plan, you will see more around the wider detriments of health. I think for me, it's actually some deliverables. So I think for me, it's about these transformation programmes. So absolutely, we can make it as wide as possible and we don't deliver anything. So actually, I don't think this is that they're not forgotten. They're very, very important. But I think the alliance providers really wanted to identify 2 or 3 things that they, and I think these are the things. Some of the work is already going. So the common assessment, that is an interface meeting that happens on a weekly basis now. But it's important, and we will be exploring that more through the year. It's not forgotten. It's just that they wanted to have 2 or 3 tangible differences they're going to make on the way they deliver service.
And perhaps some of this is within the peer navigation programme, including perhaps exploring it there.
Very high-level descriptions of the work that we're doing.
Again, really welcome to see these plans, because I think there has been a perception, possibly incorrect, that we maybe weren't moving as fast as people would like on transforming mental health, so really appreciate this. I was just wondering, you mentioned some of the major providers, where we see now the role of the voluntary sector in this planning.
So the voluntary sector is a key partner in the Mental Health OBC Alliance, which continues. And where we are looking at the more integration of physical health as well, voluntary sector has a role and a very important role to play in those transformation plans. Catherine Williamson, who I'm sure you all know, has been involved in some of the scope of this, but absolutely need to ensure that voluntary sector is appropriately represented in our plans and delivery of our plans.
Any other comments, or I'll move us on? Branko?
So just to ask about the OBC for physical health, what is the, at the beginning of OBC, there was the involvement of Kingston and West Middlesex Acute Trust with the OBC. Now they are not active partners. In future, would there be any changes? Are they going to be taking more proactive role, or?
That's what I talked about the leadership meeting at the beginning, Branko, sorry.
You were light off.
So when I said the meeting we had last week, they absolutely want to be a partner within the transformation, and all partners will recognise that OBC is just a strand of that transformation. So I think, and I've been talking to others about, actually we probably need to call it something different now. That actually because it's evolving into something else, but absolute commitment from all partners who provide services in Richmond to work together to transform. So I have no doubt their commitment. It's just that we've got to find a way that the whole system works together, of which the OBC contract is a part of that, but it's not the whole of what we will be doing.
Julia?
And then there's another strand of work that's going on, which is in the outpatient planned care space. And Kingston Hospital and Chell West are quite central to that piece of work. So from that point of view, they're engaging also in other pieces of work as well.
Okay, many thanks, Julia, for that update and that very positive message. Spring is perhaps really here, although everybody's putting their coats on around the table. Right. Moving us on then to 2.4. Fergus, I assume?
Thank you, Chair. This is just a short report to inform the governing body of the outcome of the annual NHS England assurance process for CCG's emergency preparedness, resilience and response actions. I'm really pleased to be able to report that we have achieved a substantial level of compliance. In previous years, I think we've reported this just through the audit committee, but as part of the assurance process, they're very keen that going forwards we report this level of assurance to our governing body. And I've also indicated that we will include this within our annual report to make sure that there's that oversight and awareness of this. There are a couple of minor actions for us to address, one of which was reporting here and at the annual inclusion in the annual report. And some work for us to do now that we're working together as a local delivery unit out of one office. We need to revisit some of our action plans to ensure that they reflect our new working arrangements. So I'm very happy to take any questions, but the paper is here just for information.
So I feel very reassured that we've been assured. Has anybody got any questions or queries? I think your report was very full. Thank you very much. So I'm moving us on now to 3.1, quality, safety and performance. Is this Zara?
Thanks, Graham. So the South West London performance scorecard is attached. And I think it shows that Richmond has fared well through what has probably been quite a long winter for everybody in the system. And then just moving on towards the summary report from the QSP meeting, you can see that the outcomes from the CQRGs are documented, and it might just be worth saying that two of our providers, so Kingston Hospital and HRCH, are preparing for their CQC visits. And I think West Middlesex have had their overall rating as good. So that's great news. And then the only other thing that I wanted to draw everyone's attention to was towards the end of the report about the medicines optimisation, where some new information has been released from NHS England on items that shouldn't be routinely prescribed. And that goes back to some of the work done in summer of last year on the Choosing Wisely consultation. And just we've asked the medicines optimisation team to produce a paper that will come to CET and then back to governing body. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Zara? Wow, you can turn your light off then.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say thank you very much to everybody for your support for the last year. Thanks.
And yes, publicly thanks for all the effort you've put in, because you've been very hard-working and very productive. So we will miss you. Thank you. 3.2, Finance Committee Summary and month 12 outcome. Do you want to kind of merge the two together, or do you want to take them separately? Because one seemed to me naively to be about month 11 and the other about month 12, and maybe someone's overtaken the other, or have I misread it?
So you're right. There was one about month 11 and one about month 12. So if I could take them sort of separately, but that would be helpful. Thank you. So I'll be brief. The summary of the Finance Committee was the Finance Committee that took place on the 27th of March, and therefore we were looking and reviewing the month 11 report. The committee reviewed the report that they were given and recognised that at that time we were reporting a deficit position of 5.9 million against a 5 million deficit plan, and that was due to the allowable movement that we were advised that we could do in terms of the no cheaper stock obtainable. And because it was now an allowable movement, this wouldn't impact on our CCG assurance rating. So that was a positive to get assurance about that. The other thing that we highlighted to the Finance Committee in March was that we had agreed a year-end position with Kingston Hospital, so that minimised the risk going into month 12 and year-end closure, and also that we were in the midst of having a conversation with Chelsea and Westminster in terms of a potential part-year block for 18-19 at the West Middlesex site, because they were implementing Cerner, and actually we can say that we've achieved that in terms of the contract moving forward. The other thing that we raised at Finance Committee was that we went through the draft, the initial draft plan for 18-19 that was due on the 8th of March, and we recognised that actually there was a challenge there in terms of looking at the control total, but we knew that we'd update the Finance Committee for the final plan that actually went in on the 30th, yesterday. And in terms of contract sign-off, we were just updating the Finance Committee as to where we were, and we were assuring them that we were going to meet our deadline of the 23rd of March. In terms of the ones that we had control over, absolutely, we got all of the contracts signed within that period. The outstanding contract that is still not agreed is Imperial, and that is because there are some issues with the host CCGs in North West London and Imperial. So we're waiting for that to be resolved first before coming down to the associates. So that's all I was going to cover for the Finance Committee, unless you've got any questions.
So any questions for Yarlini?
Okay, so moving swiftly on to the month 12 report, which you'll notice that the numbers do not quite align to the numbers that we've just said in the month 11 report, and hence that's why I wanted to do it in a separate way. So in terms of the month 12 report, we reported a draft deficit position of 4.4 million, so an improvement from the 5.9 that you've just heard. And this is because of, if I can take members back to the letter that we received from Paul Baumann and the release of the 0.5% non-recurrent reserve, which is a favourable movement to the bottom line. So most of that movement is down to the nearly 1.2 million that we had released for the 0.5% non-recurrent reserve. Also in that letter, there was the agreement to release the benefits of the Category M savings that up until this point we weren't allowed to do. So predominantly both of those adjustments have meant we've moved from the 5.9 reported to a draft final position of 4.4 million, which is fantastic because it's well within the 5 million deficit plan that we were set. So that's very clear, I'm sure. And in terms of the other things that we've achieved for month 12, we have achieved a really good rating in terms of the Better Payment Practice Code, and we've achieved our cash target for month 12. We also were lucky enough to receive some capital spend this year. You have to make sure that you do not breach your capital resource limit, and we came in line with that. The other target that we have to adhere to is to ensure that we meet our running cost target. Our allocation was 4.3 million. We've come in slightly under at 4.22 million. So again, that is a really good achievement for Richmond. The only area of caution and that we need to look at is the achievement of our QIP plan. So there has been some slippage on the QIP schemes that we've had. We estimated that, and we haven't got the final figures in because we're always a month in arrears, but at the moment we're estimating a 9.2 million position against a 9.6 million revised plan. So not far out, but actually we need to look at that. And moving forward, when we look at 18-19, it's concentrating on more of the transformational schemes, because actually we've used a lot of transactional schemes to get us to this position. What you might find helpful is on page 5 of the report is we've put in how we spend our money. It's quite, I think it's quite a useful slide, and this goes into the annual report as well to show the areas of spend. It's very similar in terms of percentages for previous years, and it shows that just under 0.5% is spent in the total acute commissioning portfolio. So I was going to stop there and take any questions that you may have.
So any questions for Yarlini?
No. So for next time, we will be bringing back the 18-19 plan to governing body for approval.
Any comments? So just a brief comment from me. Well done to your team and everybody for working so hard to actually come in what I regard as under budget. I'm sure I'm using all the wrong terms. By a smidgen, or as I would put it, about a couple of very expensive Ferraris. So it's a significant sum of money in real terms to me. And I do like your graph with the sixths. My only other comment was I'd read in some authoritative journal like the Sunday Times that drug costs in hospitals are now exceeding drug costs in primary care for the first time. And just flag that up in our negotiations with hospitals. I'm sure we've got a good tight control on that, but that's obviously a trend that's moved dramatically in the last decade or so.
Yes, I mean, that trend has been in the pipeline for the last decade and is now being realised. Most primary care innovation has probably gone off patent. Not a lot of investment going in from a research standpoint, I think, from pharmaceutical industry, and specialty medicines in hospital, undoubtedly the way that industry and the innovation cycle has gone. And particularly, I suspect, a lot of these new cancer drugs are demonstrating severe, really good benefit for patients. So even though they may be expensive, it might be the wrong line to look at. That's no conflict of interest, by the way, from...
If there are no other comments, then I'm going to move us on to 4.1. Okay, Commissioning Committee, that's you again then, Bob.
Yes, well, this is just in for information. This was the committee meeting held on, I think, the 6th of February, so this is quite a while ago now. I would just highlight a couple of pieces in this. One, we spent quite a bit of time talking about e-referral. Clearly, this is a major issue for primary care. This is the NHS going paperless, so we have a programme which is addressing that. You'll see from the notes that there are clearly some concerns about the achievability of this, but I think we should be assured that there's a great deal of effort going in to make this a reality. I'd also point out that we did have a session around the GP out-of-hours procurement project, which we'll bring back, I suspect, at the next governing body meeting, as we'll have that again on Primary Care Commissioning Committee in the future. We also had an update about the extended primary care commissioning intentions and also the South West London Primary Care Access Fund, where we did agree with the requests for a committee in common across South West London to the allocation of those funds to CCGs. The finance, we had a detailed finance update, which of course has been incorporated into Yarlini's update that she's given, and also we had a lengthy update on the primary care strategy, which we've also heard from Catherine. So that was all I want to say. Anybody? Any questions? No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. That was a perfect segue into 4.2 and the report from the Committee for Collaborative Decision Making.
So this is the meeting that we meet in across South West London, and we had agreed 2 items for that committee. One was around the extended access funding, which was discussed in the primary care committee, but also I talked about earlier when we were talking about how we are working on transforming primary care. So we agreed on that item to a capitated amount for each CCG and to be used on continual delivery of the access targets, but also some transformation funding to look at primary care at scale. And we also looked at the IFR, individual funding request process for South West London, and we agreed a South West London approach to that, which will, I think again we've had that discussion at governing body, where we will actually ensure that we get better outcomes, so some kind of standardisation about how we run the process, but also we think that will be a more efficient way of delivering the process as well. Both of those items were agreed. You have the full minutes, and you also have the convener's report, which is a 1-page at the very back that just gives you the overarching decisions that were made.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for Sarah? Stavrila?
I just wondered whether mental health IFRs were discussed in this framework.
No, they weren't specifically, but what we can do is we're starting to look at mental health across South West London and see where we might make inroads on looking at where we should do things once for South West London. So I can sure we can pick that up and see whether or not that's an option. Actually, we've got Tonya as our lead for South West London on mental health, so I'm sure she will take that away. But at this point, it was just the existing panels for physical health across South West London that were looked at.
Any other questions or queries? If not, I'm going to move us on to AOB, and I'm going to go around the table from Kate, anti-clockwise, or clockwise even. No. I think I was so discombobulated by the cameras. Did we do apologies for absence? We didn't, did we? So Nicola Bignall sent her apologies, and Anne Dornhurst. Did we have any others? Have I forgotten anything else? Hopefully not. Marvellous. Okay, age and technology. Date of next meeting is Tuesday, 3rd of July, and we'll be back here and hopefully slightly warmer so we can leave our coats at home. Did we have any written questions from the public? So members of the public present are invited to ask questions of the CCG governing body relating to business being conducted. Priority will be given to written questions. We haven't had any that have been received in advance.